What force in this world could compel a parent to lock their own child in a cage, treating them not as human, but as an animal? It's a question that defies reason, a nightmare we tell ourselves could never happen in the real world. But it did. Get ready, because the story I'm about to share will challenge everything you think you know about love, betrayal, and the silent horrors that can hide behind a closed door. Let me know your initial thoughts in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from tonight. And be sure to subscribe and turn on all notifications, because you must hear how this ends. Julian Vance felt the whisper of a former life as he guided his gleaming black Aston Martin down the fractured asphalt of Ironwood Court. The contrast was almost violent. His vehicle, a testament to a fortune built on code and relentless ambition, seemed to suck the very light from the bleak surroundings. This wasn't a neighborhood. It was a testament to forgotten dreams. The houses, hunched and weary with peeling paint and sagging porches, stood like silent mourners at a funeral for hope. The air, thick and humid, carried the cloying scent of damp earth, uncollected garbage, and something else. A faint, acidic tang of despair that caught in the back of his throat. He had clawed his way out of a place just like this, and he had sworn he would never return. Yet here he was, 8 years later, drawn back by the one piece of his past that mattered more than all his millions. He was here for his son, Leo. Julian was now a titan of the tech world, his net worth a staggering $80 million. His company, Nexus AI, had revolutionized data processing, making him a household name in Silicon Valley. He lived in a glass mansion overlooking the ocean, dated models, and had a world of luxury at his fingertips. But every night, in the silent echo of his sprawling home, the face of a small boy he barely knew haunted him. For 8 agonizing years, he had been kept at arm's length by his ex-wife, Isabella. 8 years of faithfully wiring $5,000 on the first of every month, a sum he imagined provided a comfortable, happy life for his child. 8 years of rejected calls and a litany of excuses that felt like sandpaper on his soul. Leo is with his grandparents for the summer. Leo has the flu and can't come to the phone. Leo is at a special boarding school for gifted children, and they don't allow visits for the first semester. Each lie was a carefully constructed brick in the wall she had built between father and son. But Julian's patience, a commodity he rarely possessed in business, had finally been exhausted. A recent attempt to send a birthday gift, an expensive telescope, had been returned to sender, marked "Address Unknown." The fear that had been a dull ache in his chest for years suddenly sharpened into a blade of pure panic. He hadn't just hired a lawyer this time. He had hired a team of private investigators. They had tracked Isabella here, to this forgotten street on the outskirts of Oakhaven, living a life that made no sense, given the money he sent her. Today, there would be no more excuses. Today, he wasn't taking no for an answer. He parked and stepped out of the car, his hand-stitched Italian leather shoes making a soft, alien sound on the weed-choked sidewalk. He approached the small, dilapidated house at the end of the cul-de-sac. Its faded yellow paint was flaked and graying, like a dying daffodil. A child's broken tricycle lay rusted on its side in the patchy brown grass. It couldn't be Leo's, he thought. Leo was 9 now. His gaze fell upon a window, not just cracked, but sealed with a spiderweb of packing tape, as if to keep something from getting out, or perhaps from being seen. An inexplicable chill traced its way down his spine despite the suffocating summer heat. Where was the $84,000 he had sent just in the last year? It was enough to buy this entire block. He took a deep breath and knocked, the sound echoing with a hollow finality. Seconds stretched into a minute. He knocked again, harder this time. Finally, the door shuddered open a few inches, held by a grimy security chain. An eye, bloodshot and wary, peered out. "What do you want?" a woman's voice rasped, rough with disuse or cheap cigarettes. "Isabella?" Julian asked, his own voice sounding foreign to him. He could barely recognize her. The vibrant woman he had once loved was gone. This person was a husk. Her skin had a waxy, sallow quality, pulled tight over her cheekbones. Her once radiant dark hair was a tangled, greasy mess, and the stench of stale alcohol and unwashed clothes wafted through the gap in the door. Recognition flickered in her dull eyes, quickly replaced by pure terror. "Julian," she breathed, her voice a fragile whisper. "My God, what are you doing here? You can't be here." "I'm here to see my son, Isabella," Julian said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He placed a hand on the door, a silent command not to close it. "I'm not leaving until I see Leo." No, it's not a good time," she stammered, her eyes darting nervously back into the darkness of the house. He's at a friend's, for a sleepover." Julian's eyes narrowed. It was a Wednesday, mid-afternoon. A sleepover? On a school day? "He's homeschooled now," she lied, the words tumbling out too fast. "His friends are too. You should have called. You should... Just go, Julian, please. Come back another time." It was then that he heard it. It wasn't loud. It was a faint, almost imperceptible sound, like the scratching of a small animal. And a whimper. A soft, mournful whimper that seemed to be squeezed from a place of unimaginable suffering. It seemed to come from behind the house. His entire body went rigid. Every predatory instinct he possessed came alive. "What was that sound?" he demanded, his voice dropping to an icy calm. "Sound? What sound?" "It's the neighbor's dog," Isabella said, her face ghostly pale. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the door. "I didn't hear anything." But she was a terrible liar. Her panic was a palpable thing, thick and choking. Heavy, thudding footsteps approached from within, and a mountain of a man appeared behind her. He was large and fleshy, his face bloated and ruddy. A faded, grotesque tattoo of a serpent crawled up his neck, its fangs disappearing into his greasy hairline. He wore a stained tank top that did little to hide his bulging gut. This had to be Frank, the new husband the investigators had mentioned. "Who the hell is this?" Frank grunted, his voice a gravelly snarl. He looked Julian up and down, his small, piggish eyes lingering on the expensive watch on Julian's wrist with a mixture of contempt and greed. It's Leo's father," Isabella whispered, shrinking back from the man's presence. "Father?" Frank sneered, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Well, Mr. Father, you heard the lady. Now's not a good time. So why don't you climb back into your shiny little toy car and drive away before you get it scratched? My son is in this house. I want to see him. Now," Julian said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. He was no longer asking. The scratching sound came again, this time accompanied by a low, guttural moan. It was a sound of profound misery, and it vibrated through the soles of Julian's shoes. His heart, which had been pounding, now felt like a cold stone in his chest. Something was terribly, monstrously wrong. "Look, pal," Frank said, taking a step forward and puffing out his chest in a pathetic attempt at intimidation. "The kid ain't here. If you don't leave, I'm calling the cops for harassment." "Go ahead," Julian said, his voice flat and dead. Call them. I'd love to have them here when I find out what you're hiding. He had seen boardroom bullies and corporate sharks. This man was just a thug, and Julian was not afraid. Frank and Isabella exchanged a look, a frantic, shared moment of pure panic that confirmed every terrible suspicion brewing in Julian's mind. It was the look of two animals caught in a trap of their own making. "Fine," Frank spat, the ugly smile returning. "You want to see him so bad? Fine, see for yourself. But don't come crying to us when you find out your precious kid is a disappointment. Some kids are just broken." The words hung in the humid air like a poisonous fog. They led Julian around the side of the house, through a yard that was a battlefield of refuse. Piles of empty beer cans, fast food wrappers, and broken, forgotten appliances lay scattered across the dead yellow grass. And there, tucked away in the back corner, almost hidden by overgrown, thorny bushes, was a small, dilapidated wooden shed. It was crude and ancient, cobbled together with rotting planks of wood and a corrugated tin roof held down by cinder blocks. But it was the smell that hit him first. It was a physical assault, a gut-wrenching wave of filth. The overpowering stench of ammonia, of human waste, of decay, and underneath it all, the metallic scent of old fear. "What is that?" Julian asked, though a part of his soul already knew. "Old tool shed," Frank said with a dismissive shrug. "Came with the property." The whimper came again. Closer. It was coming from inside that box. Julian felt the blood drain from his face. His world, which he had so meticulously built and controlled, tilted violently on its axis. He stumbled forward, his legs suddenly weak. "No," he whispered, the word a choked plea to the universe. "No, you didn't." "Didn't what?" Isabella asked, her voice a thin, reedy squeak. Julian broke into a run, covering the last 20 feet in an instant. He reached the shed and fell to his knees. The door was a solid piece of plywood, held shut by a thick, heavy-duty padlock and hasp. Through a small, fist-sized hole in the wood, he could see only darkness. "Leo!" he screamed, his voice cracking, tearing from his throat. "Leo, are you in there?" A beat of silence. Then a small, fragile voice from within the suffocating dark. "Daddy? Is that you?" Time stopped. The sounds of the world, the distant traffic, the buzzing of flies, his own frantic heartbeat, all faded into nothing. The only reality was that voice, his son, his baby boy, trapped in this filthy box. A volcanic rage, purer and hotter than anything he had ever known, erupted from the core of his being. He spun around to face Isabella and Frank, his eyes blazing with a fire that could have melted steel. "Get this lock off, now!" he roared, the sound inhuman, a primal scream of a father whose child was in peril. "Now hold on a second, you don't," Frank began, but Julian was already moving. He lunged at Frank, grabbing the front of his stained tank top and slamming him back against the side of the house. The structure groaned in protest. "If you don't open that lock in the next 5 seconds," Julian snarled, his face inches from Frank's terrified, sputtering expression, "I will tear you apart with my bare hands, and then I will tear this house down, board by rotten board. Do you understand me?" Terrified, with fumbling, trembling hands, Frank produced a key from his pocket and unlocked the padlock. The click of the mechanism was the loudest sound Julian had ever heard. He shoved Frank aside and ripped the door open. The darkness inside reluctantly gave way to the hazy afternoon light, revealing a scene from the deepest pits of hell. The floor was packed earth, littered with filth and old rags. In the far corner, huddled as far from the door as he could get, was a boy. He was skeletal, a small, frail creature of sharp angles and pale skin. Julian could count every one of his ribs through the tattered, oversized shirt that hung from his bird-like frame. His dark hair was a long, matted mess, caked with dirt. His bare feet were raw and covered in open sores. And clutched in his small, trembling hands, held to his chest like a holy relic, was a shriveled, moldy potato. He was protecting it, as if it were the most precious treasure on earth. "Leo?" Julian whispered, the name breaking apart on his lips. The boy looked up, his movement slow and timid, and Julian found himself staring into his own eyes, the same emerald green, but these were clouded with a fear so profound, so old, it seemed impossible for a child to contain. This was his son. The child he had pictured laughing on a playground, sleeping in a warm bed. This was what his money, his blind trust, had paid for. "Daddy," Leo breathed, his voice barely audible. "You came. I knew you'd come." Every instinct screamed at Julian to rush forward, to sweep his son into his arms and hold him forever. But he saw the way Leo flinched, the way his small body tensed, preparing for a blow. He was terrified of contact. The sight broke something deep inside Julian, a part of him he didn't even know existed. He forced himself to stay still, to control the storm raging within him. He slowly turned his head, his gaze falling upon Isabella and Frank with a murderous calm. "How long?" he asked, his voice deathly quiet, each word a chip of ice. "How long has he been living in this?" "It's not how it looks, Julian, I swear," Isabella sobbed, the tears a disgusting, self-serving display. He's a difficult child. He kept trying to run away. We had to keep him safe." "Safe?" Julian exploded, the carefully controlled calm shattering into a million shards of white-hot fury. He gestured wildly at the squalid shed, at his emaciated son. "You call this safe? He's living in a latrine. He's eating garbage. Look at him, he's skin and bones." "He needed discipline," Frank grunted, crossing his thick arms with a defensive shrug. "Kids these days are too soft. You gotta be firm." A red haze descended over Julian's vision. He took a menacing step towards Frank, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles were white. "You locked a 9-year-old boy in a shed, you starved him, He's not even my problem," Isabella suddenly shrieked, her voice high and shrill with desperation. "I never wanted him. He was always your baggage. You want him so damn bad? Here, take him." The words were like bullets, striking Julian in the chest, his own child, discarded like trash. He turned away from the two monsters, his heart a gaping wound. He crouched down at the entrance to the shed, forcing his voice to be gentle. "Leo," he said softly, "it's me. It's okay now. Daddy's here. I'm going to take you home. A real home." And tears, clean and heartbreaking, welled in Leo's large, haunted eyes. "For real? You won't leave again?" "Never," Julian choked out, the promise a sacred vow. "I will never ever leave you again, Leo. I swear it." He slowly, carefully, extended his hand. He didn't dare move closer. After a long, agonizing moment, Leo's small, stick-thin hand reached out and took his. It felt impossibly fragile, like a bird's wing, and it was as cold as ice. Julian's touch was gentle as he helped his son to his feet. Leo was unsteady, his legs trembling from weakness. "We are leaving. Now," Julian said, his voice hard as diamonds. He carefully scooped Leo into his arms. The boy weighed next to nothing, a feather-light burden of bone and sorrow. "You can't just take him," Isabella shrieked, lunging forward. "I have custody, the papers say so." "Watch me," Julian snarled over his shoulder as he strode toward the sanctuary of his car. "This ain't over," Frank yelled from the porch, his face purple with rage. "It's your word against ours! You can't prove a damn thing!" Julian stopped beside the Aston Martin. He gently set Leo down by the passenger door and then turned, a cold, predatory smile touching his lips for the first time. "You're right," he said, his voice calm. "It is your word against mine." Then he slid his phone from his pocket. "But it's also your word against this." He turned the screen towards them. On it, crystal-clear video was playing. A video of the backyard, of Frank unlocking the shed, of Leo, emaciated and clutching his rotten potato. A video that had captured every single damning word they had spoken. Isabella's claim that she never wanted him. Frank's chilling defense of discipline. Julian, a man who documented every important meeting of his life, had instinctively started recording the moment they led him to the back of the house. "You see," Julian continued, his voice dripping with contempt, "I'm not just a rich boy. I'm a man who anticipates betrayal. I came prepared." Isabella's face drained of all color, leaving it a pasty, sickly white. Frank looked like he was about to vomit. "I am taking my son," Julian announced. "And tomorrow morning my legal team will be in contact with you, as will the Oak Haven Police Department, Child Protective Services, and every news station in this state. You're famous now." He opened the car door and helped Leo settle into the plush cream leather seat. The boy looked impossibly small and lost in the opulent interior. As Julian slid into the driver's seat, Leo spoke, his voice a tiny whisper. "Daddy, I was saving this. For you." He held up the moldy, shriveled potato. I thought if I saved my food, you would come back sooner." Julian couldn't stop the tears that streamed down his face. He didn't bother to wipe them away. His son, his broken, beautiful boy, had been starving, but had saved a piece of rotten food for a father he wasn't even sure would ever come. The sheer, unadulterated love contained in that small, selfless act shattered him completely. "Oh, Leo," he sobbed, his voice thick. "You don't ever have to save food again. Not ever. We're going to get the biggest, warmest meal you have ever seen. And then we're going home. Our home. Together." As the Aston Martin's powerful engine roared to life, Julian glanced in his rearview mirror. He saw Isabella, collapsed onto the dead grass, her body shaking with convulsive sobs. Frank was gone, likely having fled inside like the coward he was. But Julian saw something else that made his blood run cold. In the grimy windows of the neighboring houses, curtains twitched. Faces peered out, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and shame. They had all known. They had to have known. How many times had they heard his son's cries carried on the night air? How many had seen this little boy wasting away in their periphery and chosen to look away, to lower their heads, to stay silent? "Daddy?" Leo asked quietly, pulling him from his dark thoughts. "Yes, buddy. I'm here." Is Mama gonna be mad that I left?" Julian's heart, which he thought couldn't possibly break any further, splintered into 1,000 more pieces. Even now, after everything, his son was worried about pleasing the monster who had imprisoned him. "No, Leo," Julian said, his voice thick with emotion but firm with resolve. "Mama is never, ever going to hurt you again. And neither is he. I promise you that." They drove for a time, in a silence that was filled with unspoken words. Julian kept stealing glances at his son. Leo was pressed against the window, his eyes wide, gazing at the passing world of strip malls and gas stations, as if it were a fantastical alien landscape. Perhaps, in a way, it was. How long had it been since his world was larger than a 6-by-6-foot box of dirt and shadows? "Where are we going?" Leo asked, his voice barely a whisper. "First, we're going to a special place with doctors, just to make sure you're all right," Julian explained gently. "Then we'll get you a mountain of new clothes. And then we're going home." What's home like?" A real smile, the first one in what felt like a lifetime, touched Julian's lips, though tears still glistened in his eyes. "It's big, Leo. Very big. You're going to have your own room, and it's bigger than that entire house we just left behind. It has a giant bed and a window that looks out at the ocean. And there's a swimming pool, and a yard so big you can run until you can't run anymore. And you're going to meet Mrs. Gable. She's my housekeeper, and she has a heart as big as the sky. She's been waiting to meet you for years, and her chocolate chip cookies. They're world famous." "Cookies?" Leo's eyes widened, a tiny spark of light in their depths. "Real ones?" "As many as you want, buddy," Julian promised, his voice thick with unshed tears. "An endless supply." He pulled the car into the emergency entrance of Oak Haven Children's Hospital, a facility he knew well from his philanthropic donations, but had never imagined he would enter as a terrified father. He had called ahead from the car, his voice a frantic but controlled mess, explaining the situation to his personal physician, who had arranged for a team to be on standby. As they walked through the automatic glass doors into the bright, sterile-smelling world of the hospital, Leo suddenly stopped dead. He tugged on Julian's sleeve. "Daddy?" "What is it, son?" "Thank you," the little boy whispered, looking up at him. "Thank you for not forgetting me." Julian dropped to one knee, putting himself at eye level with his son. He cupped Leo's face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. "Leo, listen to me. And I want you to really hear this. I never forgot you. Not for a single day. Not for a single second. Every day for 8 years, I thought about you. I wanted to see you. But I didn't know, Leo. I swear to God, I didn't know what was happening. If I had known, I would have torn down the world to get to you sooner. Forgive me for not knowing." "It's okay, Daddy," Leo said, his simple, childish forgiveness a balm on Julian's shredded soul. "You're here now." The doctors and nurses were incredible. They whisked Leo away with a gentle efficiency that spoke of deep compassion. Julian was left in the hallway, the adrenaline that had been coursing through him for hours finally giving way to a bone-deep tremor. He paced the corridor like a caged lion, his mind a chaotic whirlwind of rage, grief, and terror. He pulled out his phone and dialed William Sterling, the sharpest, most ruthless attorney in the state. "William," he said, his voice ragged, "clear my schedule. Clear your schedule. I need you to file for emergency custody, tonight. I have him with me." "Julian, what's happened? You sound terrible." "I found him, William," Julian said, his voice breaking. "They had him locked in a shed, my son, they were keeping him like an animal. God, William, he's starving. I have video. I want them arrested. I want full custody. I want them to burn for this." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then William's voice, stripped of its usual bravado, was deadly serious. "I'm on my way to the hospital. Do not talk to anyone else. Do not post a single thing online. Say nothing. We will bring the full weight of the law down on them. They will rue the day they were born." 2 agonizing hours later, a doctor with kind, weary eyes and a name tag that read Dr. Anya Sharma approached him. Her face was a grim, professional mask, but it couldn't hide the horror she felt. "Mr. Vance, I'm the head of pediatrics. I need to talk to you about Leo." Julian's heart hammered against his ribs. Is he going to be okay?" "He is a remarkably resilient little boy," she said, her voice soft but direct. "Physically, we can help him, but there are things you must be prepared for. He is suffering from severe malnutrition. We've put his age at 9, but his body weight is that of a healthy 5-year-old. He shows evidence of long-term vitamin and mineral deficiencies, which has affected his bone density. He has multiple infections on his hands and feet, some of which have gone down to the bone. We had to shave his head, Mr. Vance. His hair was so severely matted with filth and feces it was the only hygienic option." Each word was a physical blow. Julian felt sick. He leaned against the wall for support. "What else?" "The emotional and psychological trauma. It's profound," she continued, consulting her chart. "Leo displays all the classic markers of what we call cagicide trauma, usually seen in abused animals. He flinches at any sudden movement or raised voice. He hoards food. When a nurse gave him a piece of bread, he tried to hide it under his gown for later. He speaks in a whisper and constantly apologizes, asking if he's in trouble, if we're going to put him back in the dark. It's a learned survival response." How long?" Julian forced the words out. "How long do you think he was like that?" Dr. Sharma looked at him, her professional mask cracking for a second to reveal a deep well of empathy. "Based on the chronic nature of his malnutrition and the depth of his psychological conditioning, our team estimates he has been subjected to these conditions for a minimum of 3 years, possibly longer. 3 years. For 3 years, his son had lived in hell, while Julian closed billion-dollar deals and planned luxury vacations. His child was locked in the dark, hungry, and terrified." "There's more," Dr. Sharma said gently. "He talks about good days and bad days. He said on good days, they would let him out and give him scraps. Sometimes he could even sleep inside, on the kitchen floor. On bad days, he was in the shed." "What determined if it was a good day or a bad day?" Julian asked, dreading the answer. Dr. Sharma's eyes filled with sorrow. "Whether or not he cried." Julian doubled over, a strangled sob escaping him as he retched into a nearby trash can. His son had been punished for crying. He had been conditioned not to show pain, because showing pain brought more pain. "Can I see him?" he finally managed to ask, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Of course, but Mr. Vance, Julian, this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. Leo will need intensive, specialized therapy. He'll need to learn how to be a child again, how to trust. There will be nightmares. There may be behavioral issues. Recovery from this kind of profound trauma is a long, winding road." Julian straightened up, his grief solidifying into diamond-hard resolve. "Whatever it takes, the best therapists in the world, the best schools, anything he needs. Money is no object." He walked into Leo's private room. His son was clean now, though his head was shaved, and he looked even smaller and more fragile in the crisp, oversized hospital pajamas. He was awake, simply lying in the massive bed, staring up at the ceiling tiles as if they held the secrets of the universe. "Hey, buddy," Julian said, his voice raspy. Leo turned his head, and a weak smile touched his lips. It was the first one Julian had seen, and it was like the sun breaking through a storm. "Daddy, look," he whispered, pointing a thin finger toward the bedside table. On it was a tray holding a small bowl of soup, some crackers, a carton of apple juice, and a cup of vanilla pudding. "They gave it all to me, and they said I don't have to save any. It's all for me." The simple, wondrous joy in his voice was the most heartbreaking sound Julian had ever heard. The basic things, that every child takes for granted. Food, safety, kindness were miracles to his son. "That's right, Leo," Julian said, pulling a chair close to the bed. "It's all yours. And there's more where that came from." "Daddy?" "Yes? Is it true? About the big house with the food?" "Very true. A refrigerator full of food, pantries full of food, anytime you're hungry, day or night." Leo was silent for a long moment, processing this. "But what if I'm not good? What if I spill something?" Julian's heart seized. He took his son's hand. "Leo, I want you to listen to me. It doesn't matter. Good, bad, happy, sad, mistakes, accidents. None of it matters. You will always have food. You will always have a warm, safe bed. You will always be loved. Nothing you could ever do would make me send you away. Ever. Do you understand?" Leo nodded slowly, but Julian could see in his wide, uncertain eyes that he didn't truly believe it yet. That trust would be a mountain they would have to climb together. "Daddy? What is it, Leo? Will you stay tonight? Just in case they come to get me." Julian looked at his brave, broken child, who had endured a literal hell on earth and was still afraid of the monsters coming back. He leaned forward and kissed Leo's forehead. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised, his voice raw. "I'm staying right here, all night." That night, Julian Vance, the multi-millionaire tech mogul, did not sleep in a $1,000 a night hotel suite. He slept, or rather dozed fitfully, in a hard, plastic visitor's chair, never letting go of his son's hand. Several times Leo woke up with a gasp, his eyes wide with blind panic, searching the darkness. And each time, Julian was there. "I'm here, Leo," he would whisper. "You're safe. I've got you." And as he sat his vigil, watching the steady rise and fall of his son's chest, his mind was a forge. He was no longer just a father. He was an instrument of vengeance and a vessel of unconditional love. The battle for Leo's past was over, but the war for his future was just beginning. And Julian would burn the world down to win it. What followed over the next few weeks was a blur of legal maneuvering, medical consultations, and the slow, arduous process of healing. 3 days after the rescue, Julian sat in a sterile, wood-paneled courtroom, flanked by William Sterling and his team. Across the room, Isabella and Frank sat with a haggard, state-appointed lawyer who looked as if he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Isabella had tried to clean herself up, wearing a frilly, inappropriate dress in a desperate attempt to look like a competent mother. Frank just looked surly and cornered. The Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison, a woman renowned for her sharp intellect and fierce protection of children, presided. When William Sterling played Julian's unedited phone video on the large courtroom monitors, an audible gasp swept through the room. The footage of Leo, skeletal in the filthy shed, clutching his rotten potato, reduced a court reporter to tears. Judge Morrison's face, typically a mask of judicial neutrality, became a thunderous storm cloud. The defense was pathetic. They tried to paint Leo as a disturbed, unmanageable child. They claimed the shed was a calm-down space. But when the judge asked Isabella why she had systematically refused every one of Julian's attempts to see his son for 8 years, she crumbled, stammering nonsensically about Leo not wanting to see him. When Frank took the stand and had the audacity to say, "The kid needed to learn. It worked, didn't it?" he quieted down. Judge Morrison had to bang her gavel to silence the outraged gallery. The testimonies from Dr. Sharma and a social worker who had made a cursory visit months earlier, only to be told Leo was at a sleepover, painted a devastating picture of sustained, horrific abuse and neglect. The neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Peterson, took the stand, weeping as she admitted she heard the boy crying for years but was too terrified of Frank to call for help. "We all knew," she sobbed. "God forgive us. We all knew and did nothing." The verdict was swift and decisive. Judge Morrison awarded Julian immediate, sole, and permanent custody of Leo. Then, in a move that sent a shockwave of applause through the courtroom, she revoked Isabella and Frank's parental rights and had them taken directly into custody from the courtroom on multiple felony counts denying bail. As they were led away in handcuffs, Isabella screaming about injustice, Judge Morrison's final words echoed in the chamber. "You lost the right to call him your son the day you valued your convenience over his life. Justice is just beginning. If you've made it this far, you're invested in Leo's journey, and I'm so grateful. Can you believe the neighbors knew and did nothing?" Let me know your thoughts on that. And if this story is moving you, please take a second to hit that like button. It tells YouTube that stories like this matter. The real journey began after the courtroom doors closed. Leo was now safe in Julian's magnificent oceanfront mansion, a place so vast and beautiful it initially terrified him. Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, became his guardian angel, a warm, smiling grandmother figure who intuitively understood his fears. She never forced him to eat, but always made sure his favorite foods were available. She didn't scold him when she found bread hidden under his pillow. Instead, she simply replaced it with a fresh roll and a cookie, whispering, "There will always be more." Healing was not a straight line. It was a chaotic dance of progress and retreat. Dr. Cohen, a child trauma specialist, visited 3 times a week. There were nights Leo woke up screaming from nightmares, convinced he was back in the dark. There were days he would retreat into a shell of silence, unable to speak. During one difficult afternoon, Leo accidentally broke a vase. He immediately curled into a ball on the floor, shaking and whimpering. I'm sorry. Please don't put me in the dark." Julian's heart shattered. He got down on the floor with his son, not touching him, but just being near. "Leo," he said, his voice choked with tears. "It was an accident. It's just a thing. Things can be replaced. You can never be replaced. We'll just clean it up. That's all. We'll clean it up together." And they did. That day, Leo learned that a mistake didn't mean punishment. It was a revolutionary concept. Slowly, tentatively, the real Leo began to emerge. The sound of his laughter, first a small giggle at one of Mrs. Gable's silly songs, echoed through the house for the first time. It was the most beautiful sound Julian had ever heard. He started asking questions, his curiosity about the world blooming. He fell in love with the ocean, with the feel of grass on his bare feet, with the simple joy of running in the yard just for the sake of running. One evening, months later, Julian was tucking him into bed. Leo was no longer the skeletal wraith from the hospital. He was a healthy, vibrant boy, his cheeks full, his shaved head now covered in a soft, dark fuzz. "Daddy?" he asked. "That lady, the neighbor, Mrs. Peterson. Why was she crying in court?" Julian chose his words carefully. "I think she was sad, buddy. Sad that you were hurting, and she didn't help." Leo was quiet for a moment. Maybe she was just scared, like I was." The depth of his empathy, his ability to find compassion for those who had failed him, stunned Julian. The next day, he drove Leo to Ironwood Court. Not to the yellow house of horrors, which now sat boarded up and condemned, but to Mrs. Peterson's small, neat home next door. The old woman broke down in tears when she saw them, apologizing over and over. "I think," Julian said gently, "that what Leo would really like is if you would read him a story sometime." And so a new ritual began. Every Saturday, Mrs. Peterson would visit the mansion and read to Leo in the garden. In helping Leo heal, she began to heal her own deep wounds of guilt and inaction. A year after the rescue, Frank and Isabella were sentenced to the maximum of 25 years in prison. The Oak Haven Shed case had become a national story, sparking a movement. It led to Leo's Law, new legislation passed in several states that mandated more thorough welfare checks for at-risk children. But Julian wanted to do more. He and Leo, now a confident and articulate 10-year-old, started the Leo Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to advocating for abused children and funding recovery centers that focused on long-term psychological healing. They turned their personal nightmare into a beacon of hope for thousands. One afternoon, standing on a stage at their foundation's first major fundraising gala, Leo stood beside his father, speaking to a crowd of hundreds. "A year ago, my world was a small, dark box," he said, his voice clear and strong. "I thought that was all there was. But my dad came. He didn't forget me. He showed me that the world is big, and it's full of light and cookies and people who help. If you see a box that looks dark, please, be brave. Try to open it. There might be a kid like me inside, just waiting for the light." Later that night, as Julian tucked him in, the old nightly ritual had changed. Leo no longer asked if his dad would be there in the morning. He knew the answer. Instead, he hugged his father tightly. "Daddy?" "Yes, son? We opened a lot of boxes today, didn't we?" Julian smiled, his heart overflowing with a love so fierce it was a physical force. "Yes, we did, Leo. Yes, we did." He watched his son fall into a peaceful, dreamless sleep, a boy who had not just survived, but had triumphed. He had taken the ugliest parts of humanity, the cruelty, the neglect, the cowardice, and with the unyielding power of a father's love, had transformed them into something beautiful, a second chance, a legacy of hope, and a powerful, enduring light. Leo and Julian's story is a profound testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the redemptive power of love. It's a reminder that even from the most horrific darkness, a powerful purpose can emerge. If their journey from a backyard hell to a beacon of hope has moved you, please honor Leo's bravery by sharing this story, liking the video, and subscribing for more stories of survival and justice that deserve to be heard. What lesson will you take away from Leo's incredible story? Let us all learn from it in the comments below. Thank you for watching.